Hello, everyone. Just want to welcome everyone to the June 14th, 2022 Travel Council Advisory Board meeting. So first, I'd like to do conflicts of interest disclosures, ex parte communication. Anyone?
What do you consider ex parte communication
I mean,
in this
Just-
board? I know, I understand it with the planning commission, but
Right.
I'm not sure what you would consider.
Well,
ex-
I guess it depends on agenda item, so I mean, today, I don't know if there's anything that we're deciding to make any decisions on that with outside conversations with him, what you just mentioned. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, just voting and discussion, right?
Yeah.
Any citizens to be heard? Anyone? And then introductions. My name is Jenny Gleason. I'm the chair. And I also work for Red Tail Air, marketing and sales.
I'm the economic development director for Granite County. And my name is August. Yes, sir.
Rachel Bartlett, Ray County Economic Development Administrative Assistant today, yes.
Robert Riberia, Assistant Marketing Director for the Travel Council.
Ben Alter, Economic Development Specialist, Grand County.
I'm Sarah Stock, Grant County Commissioner.
Thanks for coming.
Jason Taylor, board member.
Todd Porshevsky, board member representing restaurants.
I'm Mary McGann, I'm the liaison to the travel council, or the commission.
Chanel Marinuzzi, board member and representing hotels. Danny.
Daniel Leverage, board member, work at the Hoodoo Hotel.
Great. Presentations. Don't have any today.
No, not besides mine.
Nope. And then take it away the rest of the.
Okay.
Try to get in and put it up into check out the shadow.
Okay.
Good.
Got your message, Daniel. Thanks for the heads up. We'll take advantage of your presence while we have you.
Yeah, if I stop my video, it's because I stepped away. Otherwise, I'm here.
Hey, can you see my screen, this presentation? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with a couple things before we kind of get into discussion and planning. We quickly go over like what's happened at the last two county commission meetings, where the timeline is for the co-op marketing grant and the media agency RFP that we've issued. A quick update on a economic development strategic plan RFP. Ben's going to talk a little bit about where the grants are at, and a big old presentation with various indicators on visitation data, and then have a quick slide report from Melissa, who just stepped out, who was just at a conference last week at IPW, which is one of the bigger travel trade shows internationally. Okay, so at the May 17th commission meeting, the commission approved the amendment of the event grant guidelines so that we could disperse those grants that we approved in the past. So most of those things successfully happened. And then also the combination of the diversification board and the economic development board did go through after all. And then at the last meeting last week, I had put together a media agency RFP. It's kind of really important for all of the marketing stuff that we do. County Commission approved that as well. So that's been out there, and we should be opening those bids tomorrow. So a reminder of kind of where we're at on the short timelines that's really focused around the Utah Office of Tourism's co-op grant. Last Tuesday, the County Commission reviewed that media agency RFP. Last Wednesday, we issued it. The minimum we can keep it open in the state is a week. So usually we wouldn't do that, but given that we wanted to have the agency to get us to the point of actually applying for that co-op campaign, did that. So tomorrow it'll close, and Thursday morning, staff will review and award the final bid.
Well, you can only keep it open for a week.
I think it's the minimum. Yeah. So
Okay.
you can't do any less than that. You can obviously launch.
Okay, I was.
Yeah, the state one. Yeah, the state wants to have some level of like open playing field. So we've gotten, I've gotten questions from 3 agencies. So one is applying, and Relic, who is kind of like the other big player in the DMO kind of tourism media agency space, has applied, to my understanding. They've asked me questions of me, and then there's one other agency that I hadn't heard before. So that's important because at the next commission meeting next Tuesday is when we have to get kind of full approval for all of the co-op stuff before we apply and submit that application next Wednesday. So obviously we're a little kind of tight on time, and later this week, once we've awarded a bid, we're going to work with that media agency to kind of finalize, take all of the thoughts that we talked about today, looking at the data, looking at how things are looking, try to come up with a proposal that we can send out by the end of the week for kind of consideration digitally, and then we can bring it to the commission for kind of final review on Tuesday. So it's kind of building the plan as we're flying it on this particular go round, and then finish that application on next Wednesday. Any questions about like timeline, where things stand on all of that before we go into other stuff?
For the 15th, you're gonna send out a calendar
A calendar,
reminder or invitation.
yes, yeah. So you're on the scoring committee. Yep, Jenny's on the scoring committee for that. That RFP. So briefly, I have continued to work with, and thank you to those who made it to that Economic Development Board session. Last month, we had a really good conversation, and I think we have a pretty good scope of work for what is going to go into that strategic plan. It's going to be focused on the calendar years 2023, 24, 25, because the diversification money sunsets in 2026. So really focusing on those years to develop some strategy and some action. And that's going to be considered by the Economic Development Board at the end of this month. And I'm going to send that out to everybody on this board so that you can look through the scope of work before it's issued, before that meeting, and make any comments. I think it's actually getting to a point I feel pretty good. But I'll make sure that everybody has a chance to look at that. Those bullets are wrong, but Ben, do you want to give us kind of an update of where the business grants are at?
Sure. So hopefully you all received an email that we launched our grants landing page, is what I'm calling it, grantcountyutah.net/grants. If you didn't hear about it, let me know. We'll make sure you get on the email list. We're blasting this on social throughout the next few weeks. There's going to be ads in the paper this week, so please keep letting everyone know. Our first email that went out, I don't do a lot of email campaigning, so I don't know how great these numbers are, but it looks like about a third of people opened them. We got a little less than 4% of people who are like actually clicking on the link. So we definitely need your help in getting the word out through other ways, but we're going to try and soup up the emails in the future so we can increase those click rates. Yeah.
When did you send that out?
I sent that out on June 6th or 7th.
I can also just really quickly go to the website and show them.
Yeah, if you want to pull it up, that'd be great.
That'd be great.
So this is our grants landing page, and I've gotten a few comments from folks, and I am aware that the event advertising grant information is old and we need to update that, so we will soon. But right now we're focusing on those bottom 2 grants, the Moab Tourism Grant and the Star Business Grant. If you click into either of those pages, you'll get information about the specific grants, requirements for both, all the different resources that we've got up right now. And I think the most important thing that we're trying to make businesses aware of is that to apply for these grants, it is required that you meet with our current SBDC officer, Megan McFall, who's based out of Blanding. Those meetings are free. They can be done virtually or when Megan visits here. You can register for them now, and we encourage folks to get it done as soon as possible, as opposed to right before the applications are due. Megan is helping us create this grant, so she knows everything about it. So if folks are looking for free grant writing assistance or just any local business assistance in general, the sooner they meet with her, the better, because you can schedule follow-ups with her again before the grants are actually due. So that register link is on the right under resources for applicants, along with some other things that are specific to each grant. And the grant period for application will be accepting the whole month of July. My plan is to get the application on our website either end of this week or early next week, so folks can start to review the application, even though we're not going to accept applications until July 1st. But right now we have a comprehensive list of what's required and frequently asked questions. So hopefully that's giving folks enough to start preparing. But you all are the business side of things. So if you see crucial information missing, something that could require clarity, anything like that, definitely want that feedback. This is sort of a living website, so we update it regularly with that feedback. There's also, if you go back to the original landing page, at the very bottom, we're encouraging folks to fill out this form at the bottom. This is an easy way to sign up for all Grant County Economic Development emails, as well as send us a specific, I don't understand this requirement. This isn't listed. Can you help me? That goes right to me. And it's very easy for me to change the website and address those questions on an ad hoc basis. What am I forgetting?
You're working on the application.
Yes. Oh, one thing I'll say about the application, we haven't finalized this yet, but it's a pretty sure thing. We're not going to accept paper applications for this grant. Just makes our lives easier. So to make sure that we have different levels of accessibility, I'm designing it in a grant in a Word platform right now. I'll probably convert it to a Google Docs platform for those who don't have Office. And our plan right now is to have 2, hopefully 3 days in the month of July, where from about noon to 6 or 7, myself, maybe August and some other economic development team members, and Megan McFall and other SBDC members, if they're available, we're going to be at USU from 12 to 7. The SBDC has about 20 laptops that we're going to have on loan, and we're going to just send out a scheduler so folks can come in, kind of do an office hours. They can work on the laptops for free. They can ask questions on the spot, and we'll be there to help them. So be looking for that. We'll be making an announcement about that as soon as we get the logistics cleared up. But USU has given us the green light, so it's just about getting the dates and the times at this point.
That's great. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah. So, and any other suggestions you all have to make this, easy and accessible for everyone in the community, just let us know.
Awesome. Any questions about that before we're done? Keep on checking.
Sounds great. Great job.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ben's been doing an awesome job. Yeah, as ever busy for the thing. So basically, all that progress is all Ben's work. So you can take full credit for it. I flipped this above visitation because I think it makes more sense. So Melissa, I don't know if you want to speak to this at all, or
Yes, I can say that I went to IPW, so IPW is the biggest event for tourism. So people from around the world coming. So last year it was small event. It was my first time last year, so this year was crazy for me. They doubled the people, so they attend like 6,000 people at least. So I was 4 days talking with a lot of people. My appointment is supposed to be 38 appointments, but it turned 61 appointments. Wow. So people were like behind of other people that they want to talk about more. So I was like, okay, give me 5 minutes. No, we want to talk about more. And it was okay.
You just
so,
didn't go to the bathroom for like a week.
yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm drinking a lot of water because I'm talking a lot, but I need to go to the restroom. So it was, yeah. So it was really good for us. They were so involved. This is most of the frequent question that we have about our testament reservation. They were confused about if that reservation applied for all the youth parks. So I was explaining, no, it's just arches. And then they were asking about hotel, resort, restaurant, and theaters. They were asking about Rocky Mountaineer. itineraries about flights, bus, train, because right now with inflation, they don't want to travel so much driving, so they were asking about train, buses too. They were asking about if we create a huge itinerary with a sample, and we have that too, so I was doing that. Then I attend some workshops about sustainable tourism, travel data, and future travelers. So they were telling me statistics about how it's the trend for the future. And like the India market is the huge market nowadays. They were thinking that China it would be, but not anymore because of the COVID. Canada is a sustainable target. They know how to take care and respect and protect the land. So that's a good market for us. They're coming flying, they're coming driving, they're coming with a Rocky Mountaineer train. So right now, I told this to the team that we need to be focused on the Canadian market because it's the best market right now. The European market is a good market too because they already know about the sustainable program. They have direct flight from France to Solik, so they like to come to Solik and then drive to Moa, or fly from Solik to Moa too. So I have a lot of feedbacks that I was sharing with my team too. So it was good for me to go to IPW. I didn't believe that people were so involved about the sustainable program. Even the Office of Tourism, they create a Forever Mighty. So everybody's dressed in that orange t-shirt and it has a logo that Forever Mighty. So it's a sustainable program of the Office of Tourism. That's what I did on IPW, talking about MOA for 4 days.
Yeah, so most has been gone for almost 2 weeks, basically.
She rode some roller coasters.
Did you get to go anywhere? Did you get to
Yes,
do
so
anything?
actually, after the IPW, they did a closed event at the Universal Studio. They closed the Universal Studio for us. It was fantastic, but I don't like roller coasters, so I was like, this is good for me, it's beautiful, but I don't like roller coasters. So I was like, I can take pictures, I can drink, I can eat. But so yeah, next year it's gonna be in Texas, San Antonio. I don't know what's cool over there. I never went to Texas, but next
It's
year it's gonna be
It's
Texas, San
beautiful.
Antonio.
San Antonio's incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I
So
just wanted to highlight that as well as really good work.
More Adventure Center, they supposed to have a booth in front of us, but they couldn't attend. So people were coming to my table and asking about More Adventure Center too. So I was.
You
getting-
couldn't go to Orlando, huh?
Or the girl that was going got COVID like
Oh,
2
darn.
days before,
That's steep.
and we didn't have enough time to get
Train
someone
next
else,
round.
in that spot, so.
Did you lose the plane ticket and everything?
No.
Oh, I would gone.
Yeah.
Didn't ask enough people.
Awesome.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and so just for, I guess, additional context, it's mostly international buyers, right?
International
We're looking
buyers,
to
yeah.
send
I
people to
focus on
America.
the Canadian and European and Indian now, the Indian market.
All right. Now we have a lot of data to look at, think through, and evaluate. I'll let Ben start us
Yeah, I
off.
looked at this.
Sure. So yeah, so there's a ton of data on these next few slides, and I think if folks have specific questions, we can totally drill into it. But my goal is to kind of just help our board and the chamber and the public eventually just kind of get a better understanding of what data sets we have, just build a greater literacy around that so that we can use it to make better decisions. There's been a lot of questions about what's going on with travel trends, what's going on with dollars. I mean, data doesn't really say anything, but we have it to interpret. So I'm just going to go kind of section by section, different data sets we have, and talk about what we're seeing right now, what we think it means. And folks are more than welcome to just speak up when they have an idea or a question or anything. So on that note, we can go to the first slide. So this first set of data that we have comes from our STR or STAR reports. That reports on occupancy, the average daily rate of a room, and the supply of rooms in Moab. There are a few other numbers that come with those STAR reports, but I think those are the most valuable. And something that is a misconception, I don't like to advertise it because it's hard to understand, but these reports do try and measure the supply of rooms in Moab in addition to the occupancy. So when we see that we have consistent measurements of supply, we can extrapolate from that real analyses of what we think actual occupancy is and what's happening. And I have a chart with that in a moment, but this I've been circulating for a few months now. This I don't think is a surprise to anyone, is that year over year, we're on average down a little bit, in some places down significantly, and here and there we're above. This is by day, so obviously the chart is very active, and there are sort of more reliable peaks and troughs depending on the day of the week. If we go to the next chart, we can see also something that's probably not as much of a surprise to people, is that despite being down on occupancy, we're pretty high on the average daily rate of a room. As the hotel folks in the room will tell us, there's a number of reasons for that: market forces, inflation, the year we saw last year, using projections from last year to predict this year. But as you can see, we did have a pretty wide gap in April, but as we get towards the end of May, things sort of start to mellow out and reach more of 21 levels. As I think, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe folks in the market are just seeing that this year isn't like 21, so they're lowering their prices a bit. I don't know if that's correct, but it's something I thought could be behind it. And then the next chart I think is super interesting. So this is measuring, if we look from left to right, this is the supply of hotels measured every April from 2013 to now. The reason that there are different measurements every month, technically every week when we get these reports, is because hoteliers essentially, I don't know how it works on the hotel end, so Chanel or Daniel, feel free to weigh in on this, but essentially you have the option to report your data. And we have, and we have folks who reliably report, and we have folks who reliably don't. And then every now and then there's a month where someone will report and then won't, or vice versa. Someone will report for 11 months out of the year and then miss 1 month.
So brands require it. So like Hilton, big branded hotels will always require their people to report. Independent chains do not.
Right.
So it's up to the owner's discretion if they want to report or not.
And it
Is
could
there
be,
any incentive?
no,
No.
there isn't, but
Well,
we
I guess
definitely
the
talk
the
about.
incentive is that you can get the data.
You get the data, yeah.
So if you
So like
report,
if
you
you
get your
report, you
comparable.
get your comps that report every week.
So you-
Versus if you don't get any
Yeah.
data.
And we have a list of folks who don't report, and we've definitely thought about calling them up to see what would it take to get you to report, just to help us get a more accurate number. But all that is to say, if you look at the green line, it shows that we've been adding hotels to Moab since 2013. That should be no surprise to anyone. But if you look at the purple line, which is the occupancy percent, it shows that our occupancy percent has been hovering around a certain area, and for the most part, climbing incrementally. 2021 again was a big year, and then we're experiencing a decline April last year versus April this year. But I just thought it was important to note that when I looked at all the Aprils, we have about 70% of hotels reporting. So we can actually look at this chart and say it's apples to apples and say, we continue to add hotels, but overall, we're still filling these rooms. So visitation for these months has seemed to be pretty steady despite the increase of rooms. That is my analysis.
Well, that means an
Maybe
increase in
increase.
total visitation,
Right, well, yes.
but from a business perspective, for each of those individual, for the hotel
Hotels.
market at large,
Correct.
the occupancy is about standard.
About standard, yeah.
But yes, visitation increasing.
The number of people in town.
Which that makes sense for hotels to analyze it that way, percentage of occupancy, but
Mhm.
for everyone else who's like, we're trying to get a piece of the visitor pie,
Mhm.
it's
Right.
helpful to know that visitation is still increasing.
Yes.
Even though the
Did it-
occupancy
did it-
rate isn't.
I didn't think it increased this year. I thought it stayed steady.
So there,
There's more, there's a ton
Okay, go
more.
on. I've looked through
there-
this.
Sources,
Yeah.
but-
there is a dip April from last year to April to this year in both the supply of hotels and the percent of rooms filled. And when we see a dip in the supply, that can be a few things. That can be folks not reporting, that can be hotels closed. In this case, the way supply is calculated is number of days in the month times number of rooms measured. So if you take that 86520, subtract 83,100 from it, divide it by 30, it's 114 rooms. So that's the difference that we're looking at measured. from last year to this year. That doesn't mean the entire hotel sphere, but it's accounting for about 7%. Daniel, what were you saying though?
It's probably the Super 8.
Yeah, the Super 8 did
Just
close.
so you know.
That's what I think.
That's usually what it is.
Yeah, when you go by it,
Yeah.
Daniel, what were you saying?
It's closed.
One question I would have is, and I doubt anybody knows the info, but the World Mark was not considered a hotel until just a few months ago. They decided to become a hotel. Do you know if this star report includes their rooms that they've now added as hoteliers?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can totally check right after this.
I haven't seen them in any of the reports as reporting yet, but that could, I mean, maybe they started reporting in May or something like that that we don't have captured.
Okay, just curious on that.
Yeah,
I
we
don't
can
believe
totally
they're
check on that.
required to report. I don't believe they're required to report yet because they're still designated as a timeshare.
Gotcha.
So I would,
So
it would be
the study
interesting to
not
see if
to
they
do the
actually report it or not. I don't know if they would.
And as people often point out, this doesn't account for Airbnbs.
No, yeah,
and the like,
yeah, correct,
Which
yeah.
is a
The huge
part
huge part, yeah.
of visitation stays.
And a data source that we should have in the future, have had in the past.
So glad to move on to other data. So this is our Visa spend charts, and I will add the caveat that Visa claims that their data represents 60% of the credit card market. So when we're looking at this data, again, it's a representation of credit card spending. It's not the whole picture, but we try to extrapolate some trends from it. So these were the top markets, January through April, year over year. The only difference is that Grand Junction rose above LA.
Which is like, how is that possible?
I don't really know about that one, to be
Could
perfectly
it,
honest.
now how do they?
This is in terms of total expenditure. So when folks swipe their card, they have an origination postal address or an origination.
The zip code for their address.
Zip code, yes.
Yeah.
So that's how we track it in this case. So Grand Junction rose above LA, but LA was still very high. I think it was the next market.
Do you know that a lot of people are moving to Grand Junction in Colorado because they
Yeah.
can't afford Denver, so it is like the next rising.
It's gorgeous. We got Walmart.
No Costco
No,
Yeah.
Costco, no.
They have a Sam's Club.
though. Yeah. I think so.
Oh, they
Sam's
do
Club.
that.
Oh,
I don't know that they have good Philly cheesesteaks.
Haven't seen it. Been 707 taco party.
So this is looking at expenditure in the Moab area year over year in just the month of April. Again, 60% of the credit card market, and there are all kinds of factors in play: inflation, increased gas prices. But I think the big takeaway is that this year we saw the return of international spending and travel in a big way, and that helps put our numbers above last April's.
How does that compare to pre-COVID? Do you know?
We
Is it still
only-
much lower?
We only have Visa data beginning January 2020.
Oh.
We're trying to get 2019 data. We only have it beginning 2020 right now.
But it's certainly lower. I'm sure it's by a factor of like 40%.
This one I didn't update in time. We do have April numbers down, but this is March. This is just showing when international travel did start to return. We saw that in March. These were the top countries that we saw folks spending over $10,000 in town, excluding the United States and Canada. Canada definitely leads consistently when it comes to countries other than the US spending in town. Looking at April of last year versus April of this year. we
Oh, wait,
see-
can I add something?
Yeah.
To the last
absolutely.
slide. Germany started a direct flight. It was a month ago, 2 months ago to Salt Lake. So that's why we're seeing Germany.
Frank,
one of the
United
reasons.
Kingdom.
I'm sorry.
UK, it's United UK.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, sorry, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a direct flight from Frankfurt to Salt Lake and back,
Yeah,
in addition to the direct Paris flight.
We
April,
have France, France to Salt Lake, and now we have Germany to Salt Lake.
Yeah. So that's a big change.
if we look at this, these are our top categories by expenditure in town. Some things are down, some things are up. I think if you look at each individual category, you can come up with what you think are reasons why. Inflation is again a big thing. I think the only thing that really jumps out to me is that with COVID being less of a thing, I think folks are more comfortable going into bars again. And when it comes to automated fuel, it's just really expensive right now.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't have great thoughts around why we're seeing certain dips in certain times, but they're also not huge.
I would think, I mean, my quick take is like, we're seeing the same spend year over year, but people are spending their money differently. They're like, well, I still want to go to Math, but I spent all this money on gas. And I only have the same budget for my trip. So I'm going to stay at a cheaper hotel or camp, spend less at the restaurant. I'm still going to go there, but I'm spending more on gas.
I'm just gonna go out for drinks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
instead of full
Exactly.
We
I'm going to go to
need
City
hot
Market
dogs.
and then I'm going to go to Woody's.
Yeah.
Get some bread.
And then I'm gonna fill up my
PB&J.
Suburban
Yeah.
and the RV and the whatever.
Cool. And then if we go to the next one, let's see. And this is the data we have so far. We don't have May spend yet, but if we're looking at just all the visa spend in general, we're so slightly above last year, but basically tracking along. This is something that August thought of, and I think it's an interesting idea. So this is bringing together two different data sets. So this is basically taking the visa expenditure in town and dividing it by the number of folks who go to Arches, which is the number we use most often when people ask us how many visitors come to Moab. Since we don't have a great answer for that, we generally tell them, look at Arches visitation. So if we look at that, we can get an idea of what the average visitor is, or what the visitor is spending on average last year versus this year. I think that that's a disparate comparison to make, especially since Visa makes up only 60% of the credit card market, supposedly. So if you go to the next slide, I basically multiplied the Visa numbers to get it to what would be 100% of the credit card market. And this is what you get for if every Arches visitor is spending in town, this is what they're spending on average. That being said, those differences in part are because we have a lower visitation to Arches in April. And if you divide by a smaller denominator, you'll get larger dividends. So I don't know how useful this is, but definitely something that we're considering. And then on the right is just averaging the 4 months together.
I think I wanted to see this because a lot of the conversation about what is quality visitation is more spent per visitor, right? And you're trying to increase the economic impact while decreasing the amount of, people who are causing negative, bad things happening. That would be like a abstracted out theory of something we could go for. I just wanted to take a look at some ways to start capturing that and see what that looks like. And I think I would imagine that these numbers are representative of we are seeing more spend per person, but the impact of that spend is mostly going to gas. And maybe you're having those people who have less to spend are just not coming. And the people who have more to spend are spending more because they can and they're coming here. But the impact distributionally isn't necessarily landing with like more people at restaurants or more people at hotels.
Okay, this is data that's very easy, but do you have a question?
I was just curious, like, why do you just have Visa spend? Why wouldn't you, can you not get the other part of the credit card?
We buy it from Visa.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if the other credit card agencies offer this service yet. Visa's, I understand, it's not new, but it's not old either. They're still developing the service. Not a lot of folks have it. So I know it's somewhat novel in the credit card sphere. But to answer your question, we haven't looked. Other providers might offer other data that could give us a more holistic look. And
It's also going to give you a different demographic.
Yeah.
Who, everybody has a Visa, but certainly people that have more money are going to have Amex.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Totally.
And that's something that I don't know if that's part of Amex's core business is selling this data. I think that is a big part of what Visa does.
Yeah,
That's a good question.
I do think that, Visa definitely is at least 60% of the same.
Yeah.
I just, when I look at our sales, it's on to like closer to 70% of the amount of revenue comes from the visas over our credit cards. Although we are, you know, for 98, I mean, it's on the lower end of, you know, people are gonna use their Visa maybe to go out and eat, and they'll use their Amex to spend to buy their hotel room.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I definitely, all of these just offer snapshots. There's definitely good questions for us to figure out. Are there other data sets that can give us a bigger picture? So yeah, we'll take a look. That's a good question.
And is that number is for day, per week, per what?
It would be per person.
For how long though, the entire time of year?
Well, the visitation numbers to Arches doesn't measure how long someone visits. So
Or
it's
just their repeat
Or just
behavior.
like how much money they spend like while they're in Moab?
the visa numbers are how much money is spent in Moab in a time period. Yes.
But this is over a per person, like at a snapshot.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
So there's other
Someone
data
came
that
to
can,
Moab and spent $293 when they visited Arches.
per
Yes.
visit at Arches, how much money was spent in
And
town.
if the time frame could be a couple days.
Could be a couple
Yeah,
days, could be a week, could be a
We
few
have,
hours.
we have other data sets that look at like by market, like length of stay. To spend more. That, I think that's, we're taking that to an account. We're looking at the market plans and stuff like that.
So why do you think January is higher than the rest?
Well, let's take a look at the that visitation, because I think it shows, I think it helps to answer that question.
Yeah, I'll say, yeah, January is probably the lowest visitation of all the months we're about to review.
Oh, okay.
And again,
Got
that
it.
smaller denominator is gonna get you larger dividends.
Yeah, and generally, we're seeing a little bit of an increase in the off-season in visitation. So like January and
Yeah.
February are a little higher on average than historical numbers. So I think that's definitely
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
secrets out.
Yeah, who have you been telling? So this data is all readily available on national park websites. I'm always glad to put charts together for folks if they see numbers that they want visualized, but this is the visitation that Arches has been reporting. So we have 22, 21, 19, which is what we've been using for a lot of benchmarking. And then we threw in 2015 to kind of get an idea of when was the last time that this year's numbers looked like this. And it looks to be about 2015, especially when you look at April and May. March, not so much. I will say that the May data is preliminary. That's what FPS is saying right now, so things could change, but definitely lower than what we've seen. I think we all know that timed entry could be playing a huge role in that. But that's what Arches is looking like right now. And we are seeing that overall in this year and last year, visitation in January, February is going up. People are coming more in the shoulder season months than before.
Is that number is per vehicle or per person?
I believe they measure it per vehicle. Yeah, that's how Arches does it.
Yeah.
Canyonlands, kind of the same thing. Although with Canyonlands, we're seeing more general growth. I'm curious as to what May will be, because we are below 21 numbers, but we're still solidly above 2019 numbers. And then we threw in Bryce and Zion after this to kind of compare things. I know that Bryce, the temperature is definitely a factor when it comes to visiting there. It's a potentially a better time to visit there during other months. And so I see that the curve is a little more drastic here, and they're not seeing as much change year over year in terms of their visitation. And then when we look at Zion, I think that we're slowly starting to resemble more at Zion, that we've got that growth in those January and February months that we didn't have before, but steady upward trend after that.
Yeah, and then I think it's worth noting that they also are seeing a drop from 2021 in May
Yes.
for this year. Just trying to normalize what we're seeing with our comp markets.
They didn't do timed entry or anything like that, right?
No, they did in 2021 for a period of time for their shuttle system. but their shuttle system naturally has some kind of like capacity mitigation. But I don't think that they enacted that past the COVID period. Yeah. That might have been 2020. thing, not 2021. Any questions on the national park data before we move on?
Do we have any data for like dead horse or some
do.
state parks? Because that'd be interesting to see, well, just in the future compared to the, well, to understand better the Arches time to tree.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
vegetation increases in other places.
Totally.
So they, people come out instead of going to Arches, people are going to the points.
Yeah.
And in a large part, that's why we did contract with USU, Wayne Pickett at USU, to help take that big picture and rather than a month by month look, which is what we can do, kind of take it all into account and come back to us in the springtime with an academic's eye summarizing what happened, including what happened to BLM land, that our experience is good, how it is spent, all that kind of stuff.
Do you think it'd be important to like reach out to Arches, see how many like CUAs go in? Because are they going in a bus now? Like, is that minimizing it? So like 20 people going in instead of like, 20 cars now.
That's a great question. And we should probably incorporate it too.
So like maybe they can
Because I
report
think
on
the
that.
tour companies are going again where they weren't doing it for a while because it was too unpredictable without the.
Right.
Yeah. it's
So
just-
hopefully that, the research Wayne's doing is in coordination with all of the various land managers.
Mhm.
And that I'm sure we could ping him and say, can you reach out to Arches and see if we can get like CUA entrance
Yeah.
data specifically. So given that, yeah, I have some additional slides. So given that we've been talking kind of about fly-in as a campaign, wanted to get some like flight data. I just got this an hour ago, so
I was looking at it when you
Yeah.
got it because it started changing.
so it's a little, yeah, so it's a little, this is a lot to look at all at once, and I've only taken a quick pass, but just to get an idea of, this is both the Denver and the Salt Lake flights, basically percentage of how full the flights are in a given month. And so it's a year, I'm gonna try to, where's my mouse? So starting in 2018 is here. So we're kind of seeing this seasonality that I think everyone would become familiar with big spring peaks and big fall peaks. 2018 is here. And then you move to 2019, which is a growth from 2018 by a considerable amount. Kind of in the spring specifically, and in the fall looks about average. Get to 2020, you hit the huge trough in April, slow recovery. And then you come back to 2021, which is getting back to kind of that 2018, 2019 average. Then actually this year, we're actually seeing above average flights, which I had seen that or internalized that until like half an hour ago.
One thing to kind of take into account in 2022 is that it went from 3 flights last year down to 2
Per day.
offered entirely.
What
So
was the third?
it was 2 to Denver.
Okay, so
7 days a week, they have 2 flights. 5 days a week right now, they have. Nope, 5 days a week, they have 2 flights.
okay, so the number of flights is decreasing.
Yeah, offered. yeah,
Okay,
times.
so that might be
So
be
maybe
skewing these
filtering
numbers.
more people.
More
Okay.
people going in, so the pockets.
So the flights are full.
Yes, that might be one.
SkyWest is obviously consolidated.
Yeah, their revenue is probably
Only-
higher.
only point.
Yeah, exactly. So that's important to keep in mind. Something else that we do have that's going to factor into our decision making around a marketing plan is where are we seeing high flight volumes? The highest is Denver, the second is Salt Lake, and then that decreases. The third is Chicago. And I didn't bring that data in here, but that, I think if we're thinking about flights, think what markets are already flying in and have a lot of coverage. We did just speak with SkyWest today and was hoping to get some like intel on like, if we do this great, are you going to keep the Salt Lake market open longer and those kinds of things. And I think rather than feeling super strongly any which way, they're kind of like, yeah, whatever you do will be great. So we didn't really get like and they said they'd sign, you know, a letter of support that we needed to go after this kind of stuff. But to me, that would be something that would be a huge win, is if we can keep, you know, those Salt Lake City flights open year long.
At least January.
I think that'll be huge.
January, end of January, February, and part of March. I think they would get a lot of use.
And they explained that that has more to do with the federal subsidy that they get rather than like actual revenue. And so they get basically, I think, 12 flights per week subsidy. And rather than making that flat throughout the year, they're looking at this seasonality chart and saying, well, I'm going to offer the most here, and I'm going to offer the most here, and I'm going to offer the least here and here. And so they're really responding to just the seasonality that we have. And so they're focusing those subsidy flights when they're going to have the most people on it. They're like, well, if we're just not going to shift that subsidy to the winter season, basically.
I'm hoping that, like some of the people who have to travel, like commute locally to Salt Lake aren't left out of that, because isn't the subsidy for small airports
It
kind
is.
of to keep them floating?
So, but it's up to SkyWest, I think, how they plan for that, because I think they could make it flat year round and have 12 flights a week every week all year round, but they probably make less money on that.
Yeah, I don't think they really need to have 12 flights in January a week.
Right,
I mean,
maybe like
if they had two.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people could easily work around that, you know, for the weekends.
So, I mean, that's something I'm thinking about. If we're thinking of timing of like a flying campaign of like, hey, we're gonna really try to like market this off-season flight. If we fill up all your Denver flights, for example, next year, Brad, consider like if we're gonna try to flatten the seasonality curve a little bit for you. Maybe that allows you to start thinking about flattening out your supply that you're creating. Would be a thought, and I think that's as a bigger picture something I think that would be smart for us to start thinking about is how can we flatten that seasonality a little bit. Just a thought. Okay, then we have some TRT collection data that we got from Chris for reference. Ben, do you want to speak to this at all? I mean,
Absolutely.
we both looked at it about the same time earlier today. But
So Chris sent some charts that have projections, but this is actually from like a week ago, some numbers he sent. That's just straight tax report. I think these are relatively clear, but I'm happy to explain anything that's not clear. This is our TRT collections from 22, 21, and 2019. We definitely saw an increase in March year over year, but we have been up still this year. And there's a 2-month lag when it comes to tax reporting, so this is all we've got right now. If you go to the next slide, we have the same data for restaurant taxes. And I thought that was pretty stark. TRT is down in March, restaurants are way up. You know, again, as August was saying, you know, folks are still coming, visitor.
well, and it's not just restaurant, right? So this is restaurant and car rentals.
Nope.
It's not.
Nope, go to the next slide.
Shut up, August.
This is car rental data, which is down in
Just
March
that.
year over year.
Okay.
But just, again, just goes to what you were saying and what we're starting to talk about more. I think the two takeaways that I'm getting from all this data coming in, because it all says a lot of small different things. But I think the first is that 2021 probably isn't a great benchmark. And visitor behavior is changing.
Yeah, I would say 2021 with a grain of salt, because it's just gonna be very abnormal.
Yep.
I think in the long-term trend, everybody's
Oh, rainy.
had to get
last year.
outside, did all their stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there was.
And we have.
Benjamins were flying last year.
Yeah, people had their Biden bucks, and you know the economy was okay. And now, you know, inflation's out of control. Maybe folks were worried about monkeypox, I don't know. But we have many indicators that say people are still coming to Moab. They're spending differently. They're doing different things, but they're still coming.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, these are the charts that Chris sent over a few hours ago. I'm going to read off of a sheet that just has some of his bullet points, and then I will try to explain anything that doesn't make sense. So the graphs we're looking at, they use a trend analysis comparing using TRT collections from 2012 through 2019 to project what we were going to earn in 2021 and 22 versus what we actually earned.
Which is useful to know because that's what the budget is based off of,
Right.
right? Because the TRT, this year's 2022 budget is based off projected revenue for this year,
Mhm.
because that's how the TRT law is written.
No. Which color is?
So the orange is the actual, the blue is the projected, and the orange is the actual. So when the orange dips below the blue, then we have reason to believe that we're underperforming. Obviously, 2020, we were on track for something before COVID happened. So, you know, I don't know if it has a lot to say about our economy versus just the economy. But otherwise, the blue is projected and then the orange is actual. And again, if you look at 22, we only have up to March currently. So a couple other notes that Chris sent along. The county was way under projections for 3/4 of 2020, and then we outperformed the trend in September. 2021 was a big year for TRT. The entire year was significantly outperforming trends with the exception of July. We only have TRT up to March 22, but we are outperforming the trend up to March so far. Chris's prediction is that the actual collections will track back with the trend by the end of the year, and then we'll have reached a period of normalization. Since September of 2020, we've consistently outperformed the TRT growth rates that we saw from 2012 to 2019, and we've experienced quite a bit of economic growth. Collections for March 2022 are about 50% higher than for March of 2019. As for TRT collections go, we are 50% above pre-COVID levels, and that doesn't necessarily translate into a 50% increase in visitors, but it shows that we aren't, quote, in anemic condition.
Fair enough, Chris.
You almost sounded like Chris.
I don't know how to feel about that. Thank you.
So then we have a couple kind of like forward-looking indicators. As everything there is kind of either past or current. So I think as we're planning for the future, kind of seeing what's happening. So Dr. Jonathan from Love, he does his kind of travel trend spiel, and rather than have him kind of present as we're in this like RFP phase, we just set some kind of relevant indicators. So he saw that some important things. The domestic flight prices are up 36% compared to 2019, while international flights leaving the US are only up 2%. Main takeaway there is that as Americans are kind of starting to think about traveling internationally, finally unpopping that cork, I think his thought is that as we kind of relied very heavily on captive domestic travelers over the last 2 years, we might not be able to rely on that going forward, and really kind of needing to get the international visitation back. Out of 4,000 survey respondents, 30% have canceled an upcoming trip due to increasing prices. So that's future bookings, right? So that's, you know, I was planning to go to Moab in the fall or something like that, and now I can't. Now I'm worried that I can't pay my bills and cancel that trip. His words, not mine. Combine the first two data points with the fact that 80% of Americans now believe that the U.S. is going to go into a recession. I personally feel that we're going to start seeing American travelers start to reduce the amount of vacations they plan to take and reduce the costs associated with each trip as they prepare to hunker down for a recession. Doom and gloom. That's the doom and gloom report.
Hunker down.
However, experiencing nature is the second like highest thing after seeing loved ones that people want to do with their vacation, both internationally and domestically. So that's a good thing for Moab relative to the average travel market. Another thing that's interesting is that almost half of people looking for trips on TripAdvisor right now are looking for trips that are happening within the next 2 weeks. So rather than saying like, I'm going to plan for some big trip in the fall, like I'm burnt out, I need to take a vacation, I'm going to go somewhere, which tends to mean that you're going to take a smaller dollar trip more closer. Right. And I think this is another kind of piece of data. This is I can't share like the exact numbers because we don't actually subscribe to Expedia. They told us to share this internal or something like that.
Yes, they'd like us to pay before we start sharing
Their
their stuff.
So this is some snapshot we felt comfortable sharing just to get an idea. So basically they have information for us that's basically looking at bookings in Expedia world comparing like southern Utah in general, so kind of all of the gateway communities, the national parks, and then to Moab specifically, so kind of to our cohort, I guess you could say. So
November was that.
so this is future. This is looking, comparing 2019 numbers, actuals to 2020 planned bookings going forward. So for the month of July, southern Utah is down 10%, whereas Moab is seeing no change to 2019. In August, southern Utah is down 15%, Moab is down about the same. For September, southern Utah is up 10%, Moab is up 20%. So we're seeing this big, big rebound over in the fall, relatively speaking. And then in October, kind of the same numbers, comparing year to year. And then in November, both southern Utah and Moab are up 40% relative to 2019. So it indicates to me that there's going to be kind of a flat to down summer annualized, and I think that makes sense given international trends. And seeing this huge rebound in the fall, which I think for us is like time entry systems going to take a pause. And I think the fall is increasingly being a good time to be here as the weather changes. And there was international data as well that showed that we're basically 40 to 60% down compared to like a base year of 2019, which is about the same for southern Utah. So we're not out of sync there. Although seeing like tiny rebounds that show huge percentage changes for like December, for example. But
I think a data that might be interesting to see, because you have the future bookings,
Yeah.
is to look at the same period for this year after this time period's over for cancellations with Expedia. Just because like,
you're seeing all these cancellations.
right, exactly, to see what actualized, to see what cancellations happened as well.
Right.
Because like right now, hoteliers are getting a lot of cancellations because of fires, they can't get here, they have to go around different areas. So it'll be interesting to see like the natural disasters that are happening everywhere, what happens to
Right.
people with that. So,
Almost the same kind of projected but actual numbers as like
right,
the TRT stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, all of that being said, like the intention of that is to help inform marketing strategy and where we're at and kind of ground truth what people are seeing anecdotally. So I don't know, maybe it'd be interesting to hear what people are hearing in their own. kind
Yeah,
of
that's what I was
places of
gonna say,
business.
is like, you
How
know,
does it square for you individually as a business owner?
I've been hearing from a lot of outfitters lately, and a lot of like smaller restaurants and stuff, that booking that they're down, bookings are down. And so yet hotel reservations are up, or, hotel occupancies staying about the same, and so it leaves me to, what are people doing? They're coming to town, they're staying in hotels, but they're not doing activities. They're not, a lot of that stuff is staying flat. Even Arch visitation is flat, is flatter, so it kind of, I don't know, it just makes you question, like, what are people doing? Like, are they, yeah, I mean, they're not spending it on not spending money on activities, or I thought that maybe since hotel prices, in years past, we've seen hotel prices go higher, people still come to town, but activities like with outfitters and stuff drop, but visitation in Arches goes up because it's a fairly cheap activity to do for people, and that's not even happening, so.
we can't get it,
Okay, yeah,
we don't have a reservation.
Pretty easy to get a reservation. We had a family reunion, and some of them didn't know they thought, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna have time to go to Arches, blah, blah, blah. Every single one of them that wanted to go to Arches were able to get.
So I think the Arches story right now for the first 2 months of it is people saying, which I think was anticipated, I don't know what's going on there. I'm not gonna go to Arches.
Yeah.
Maybe that's more, the perception is that it's more annoying than it really is.
Well, my experience from the hotel side lately, especially this past month, has been people cannot get the reservation in the future, will not risk their vacation on a maybe the day of, so they're going somewhere else. I've had people cancel reservations a lot because of things like that. I talked to a specific guest just this past week with that exact story. Hey, I was going to be here 2 nights. I'm just going to stay one as we travel through and go to a different place. Hotel visitations to me seem to be down year over year, which makes these numbers kind of surprising. That's not what I've been experiencing at my hotel and what other hoteliers I've talked to have been experiencing. So I'm surprised to see this occupancy saying that we're doing better than what we really are. And the only thing I can think of on that is our demand or our supply grew exponentially over the past 2 years with about 4 or 5 big properties that all added in. And so while we may have the same number of visitors, the supply is being gobbled up by the extra rooms.
Makes sense.
I would agree with Daniel, because occupancy at each individual hotel is less than it used to be.
Right, but
year.
market wide.
Market wide,
It's
yeah.
probably the
Offset
same.
wide,
Market,
yes.
yeah. And so if market-wide occupancy at hotels is flat or doing decent, but the supply increased, then yeah, every hotel is going to feel a pinch.
And the occupancy
right.
should be based on supply, but right, I think that's an important thing to.
But you also don't have data from all hotels. You only have the ones that are
Yeah.
reporting, which are
Exactly.
branded,
Yeah.
I
It
would
would
say,
be
compared
nice
to
if you had a way
independents.
to get them all.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to like the car rental tax on that, does that include those numbers? Does that include like UTV outfitters and stuff like that? Or is
Like
that
the OHV tax.
OHV tax in
I
that?
think it should, but the initial collections were like insignificant. So.
We're having problems with collecting.
Yeah, I pulled this from data Chris sent around, and I'm still trying to understand it myself, but OHV was broken out as a separate line item, and it was very low.
Yeah, there's been a very much of a discrepancy between.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because basically there's, this is talking about collections from basically 2 companies now,
Right.
you know?
That's what I was thinking.
You know, like, it's pretty high for just like 2 companies, you know? I know what mine is.
Right.
So anyways, I just wondered.
Yeah, so I think there is some uncertainty on our end of like making sure that everybody, like we're pretty sure everybody's doing what they think they're supposed to be doing. And like maybe they're paying the car rental tax instead of it like as the OHV tax if they are renting like a UTV or something like that. Even if it's supposed to basically do the same thing, but just to capture those businesses.
Yeah.
So, because
This is very anecdotal. I've seen it borne out in some articles in the auto world, but I've been thinking this for a while, and other people give me these ideas. I wonder how much visitation to Moab is changing with the rise of sales of not just 4x4s, but 4-wheel drive vehicles. I mean, 20 and 21 pickup trucks and pickup truck tents, roof tents have just exploded. And I see those people in town all the time. I have no idea what they purchase when they're in town, because they seem to come with their own food and their own place to stay. So I have no idea what that translates to, but I know that just in the pandemic, Moab being sort of collateral to it has taken off. So that's actually something that I'm just in my abundant spare time going to look into for data, because I know it exists. out
abundant
there.
spare time. You don't have that.
It was a joke. I made a joke.
What you need to have is library internet tax, and then that would be sky, you know? And then 'cause all the band lifers, you know, they're in front of the library.
In
you
San
know?
Juan County, they actually,
They
they have
are,
whole,
they are in the library, aren't they?
Yeah, all the time.
The library is a popular
Oh,
place.
yeah.
in San Juan County, they have whole tech centers. Is it throughout the entire 191 corridor or just in the Monticello area? Megan was telling me that they've developed these little co-working, remote working spaces where you're never more than 20 minutes away from one of them. You can drive up and down and go to one or the other. You can get like a week subscription for like $100, and that's how they're trying to monetize the van lifers and all of that. So food for thought for us.
Just put one of those up at Swanee Park.
Yeah. Old city too.
But yeah, combined with a cell data, like dead spot as well.
Disc golf and internet cafe, Old City Park.
Anyway, any other kind of anecdotal things that either mesh with this or don't mesh with this or?
Yeah, I'd agree with Jason. I was thinking of that. the UTV tax would be an interesting data to collect or to see how that compares with the car rental tax and income and how that has changed, especially in the last 5 years. Yeah. And I do agree with you, Ben, that, yeah, obviously van lifers and truck tent things are like so many more than there used to be.
Yeah, and it happened so quickly. It's just, if we look back in a few years and be like, wow, that was exponential.
Cool. Well, I will on to the next thing.
Was was all these slides in that presentation you gave us? The last
It's
one?
the same link. We've added some
Attached
stuff.
to the event.
Yeah,
It's the same link. We just edited it. So you should be able to access all of this from that same link.
And if you can't find it, just let me know. We'll send it.
It was in our.
Yeah, it was
at the
attached to the
bottom of
Google
our,
invitation.
Yeah. Yes.
invite.
yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Are you all right if this gets shared, like with the chambers?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I'll talk about that at the end. Yes, share this with anybody.
Okay.
I'll mention this now because we just brought it up. We're trying to aim for, as we've been working on trying to get a better view of TRT, TRCC revenue and expenditures, and make that more publicly transparent. We're trying to aim for a July 6th chamber chat that I think I'd love for kind of this board to obviously be a part of as well, in addition to our office, to go through basically the last 2 years of TRT and TRCC revenue and the expenditures of the budget for our office and the other places that that money goes. As I think it's only fair to make that information as transparent, clear, and understandable as possible, because it has not been, and it's a confusing formula and all of that kind of stuff. The intention there is, the new budget season kind of starts in September, where we start getting budget requests for the next year. This body is going to put together and prioritize list of expenditures for TRT and TRCCA. And I think also trying to bring transparency as to what our department's doing, what the county's doing, as kind of this conversation of, visitation feels down, my business isn't doing very well compared to last year, and making sure that that conversation isn't happening in a vacuum outside of the county government, and trying to have that conversation collectively, basically, and hopefully bring this data to that conversation. So we're trying to, we're using the same data, trying to speak the same language, and try to collaboratively move forward as we navigate these waters, rather than, I think, what has happened historically, a lot of headbutting. So keep that in mind as a date, and I think we're going to try to bring this and clean up TRT.
It was just the first meeting in July.
July 6th.
It'll be the day after the first commission meeting. At least that's what's scheduled. If we wanted to make it a joint thing, we could do that too. But that's what we're aiming for.
July 4th.
Yeah, so it'll be Wednesday, July 6th, kind of their new chamber chat format.
Are they doing the chamber chats on Zoom, or are they?
I would imagine it'd be hybrid. I'd like for that to be have at least an in-person component, just because I think that makes it more fruitful and productive conversation. Hopefully.
It'll probably end up on the YouTube channel.
Good question. If the chamber's hosting it, we could probably do it in such a way, if it was like kind of like a joint thing with the county commission, we could do it that way. But I think that'd be, it'd probably be useful to do.
Well,
Yeah.
If it was a joint thing, then we'd have to
Announce it.
post it and not do all that kind of stuff.
So maybe we'll talk
But it
about.
might be worth it, because there's been so much
I think the public.
angst
About
about
it,
it,
yeah.
angst about it, that it might be really worthwhile.
It'd be like
Thanks, Sarah,
co-hosted.
for the most- not to worry about having a quorum, not saying you have to be there, but post it just in case there's a quorum.
Yeah, I think maybe we should talk about that. Think of how.
We could poll people and see if there's
How many
even-
are interested in
Yeah.
coming?
or if
Could you
people are
remember to
attending.
Yeah, let's poll people on this meeting next
I
Thursday.
think what I'll do is I'm gonna try to schedule a call with maybe some commissioners in Lacey and talk through the logistics of that and what makes the most sense to make that as publicly available as possible. Maybe having like the newspapers posting it and live streaming it, or I don't know whatever makes the most sense, but something along those lines. Okay, Jenny.
Okay.
Sorry,
Um,
now we're back on to like. normal.
Yeah, just, need a motion to approve, the May 10th minutes. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve May 10th.
Thank you, Jason. And then discussion, marketing strategy, do you have?
Well, is there any
Yeah.
discussion?
Oh,
on
sorry.
this?
Is there any discussion? Changes? All in favor?
All right.
Unanimous.
So that's all members present. Great. Thank you again to Rachel for doing such good minutes. We appreciate your tireless effort to follow these meetings after they happen and write notes on them. Okay.
Thank you, Rachel.
You get to go to the meetings twice.
I'll be doing it 20-minute chunks.
Oh, that meeting
not entertaining.
yesterday, that's gonna be the.
Motion v. motion.
The emotion, we're gonna, I was withdraw my emotion.
All right, well, one advisory board at a time for me. Okay, so I think we wanted to talk about just marketing strategy and goals based off of everything that we've been seeing or thing that we've been thinking about the context of the UOP marketing program deadline. I want to touch on some kind of practical things in terms of how I think this is going forward, and then I think I kind of just open it up for some conversation about, if this feels like what we're talking about is on the money, if we should think about different goals and strategies, and then bring that to the media agency that we award tomorrow or Wednesday, Thursday morning. So again, for this, the 2021 campaign that we already have money for, that after this RFP gets awarded the contract, that contract gets approved by the commission, then that would go through that agency by default. So we wouldn't have to do another RFP. The current plan is basically to try to get people from Salt Lake and Chicago to fly in to Moab, with the assumption that the farther you travel, the more you spend. You get there, if you're flying in, you have to pay for everything once you get here. So it's going to be a higher spend visitor in town. I think the question that we have been talking to Love as they helped design this initially is the only thing that they would change for that would be perhaps the target market. So, if we're seeing that people are going to take smaller trips, maybe we consolidate and really focus on Salt Lake and Denver and just try to fill those flights, for example, when they're not as full. There's also markets like Seattle's kind of coming back. Seattle and Portland are showing up as really big kind of west entry points. So you think about Salt Lake as kind of taking people from the west coast who are flying into Moab, and Denver is the eastern portal. That's kind of how those flights work. And we could kind of shift that around a little bit, but I guess fundamentally, strategy-wise, for money we've already been approved for. To me, I think once we get that media agency in place, maybe revising the markets, but keeping the strategy more or less the same feels like the way to go for that. Unless there's any kind of feedback from this board that is counter to that. And then looking to next year, there's a couple things we can think about. So the total amount that you can apply for is 250 grand of matching dollars. So the total campaign amount can be up to $500,000, right? So 250K out of the TRT marketing budget, 250 from the state, and you can apply to multiple campaigns. So it doesn't have to be one huge $500,000 campaign. It could be, here's this one thing I want to do, it's another thing I want to do. A couple things that have come up is that we are part of a 501c3 that represents all the Southern Utah national parks. Fallon, who works for Bryce Canyon Country in Panguitch, is going to do a small campaign ask through that nonprofit, which isn't going to count towards our total because it's going to be a separate entity, but we're going to commit $5,000 to that most likely. Another thing that came through that's something to think about is through Melissa's good work with all of the international kind of trade partners, especially those that work with Utah Office of Tourism, seeing the strong trends from Canada. They have a group that works in Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, and they have basically some packages that are targeting that market that would have a $16,000 total spend that they said they could help us turn into a co-op application. So that's like a small thing that we can do as well. We did last year this Utah.com campaign. So as a reminder, Utah.com is this private sector site that owns that URL, and so therefore it gets a ton of traffic. It used to be the official state of Utah's website, but it was a private company that was managing it. And so eventually the state wanted to divorce that and keep it. The state has its own website. This is its own corporation. It's a little weird to look at, but it's basically full of like paid articles. So it's like you want to go there to plan your trip, and then there's a bunch of things that people have paid for that look like real things. So it's a little weird as a model, and it's a little hard of a website to actually navigate. But what we did with this campaign was basically wrote some articles. One were very kind of responsible recreation, sustainable tourism oriented. It said "Show Mo Love for Moab" was the title. They have this kind of copy style that's very distinct and a little bit more irreverent than the average website. But it was all talking about all of these issues that we're facing and how to be a better visitor when you're here. And the main ROI for that is that they send leads to Robert that we then send out travel guides to. Do you want to speak to that? But that's not those numbers.
Oh, sure. Well, they do agree pretty much with what they reported because we get leads from various sources. Our database program does filter out a bit. Still got about 3,700 leads from April through October, or October through April, like the campaign. So to a degree, very strong with it.
For
The
25
thing I
grand.
like about it, because Utah.com is
4,000 leads.
yeah, upward of that. It also generates a lot of outgoing links to other Moab businesses.
Right.
They do report that. That's a pretty good number. But the thing I like most about it is we can control the content. We'll pretty much change anything that we send them. So the whole responsible recreation thing is that's a good vehicle for it.
So how many, so if we got 4,000 leads from them from April to October,
Right.
which was the campaign length. How many leads did we get just from our website?
I heard both. Was it October to April or April to October? That was October to April. Okay.
How does that compare to the lead?
I don't have an exact number off the top of my head, but I can tell you, just based on what I do on a daily basis, it's probably about 2/3 as much. Than what we get from Discover Wallet that we get from them.
Okay, so they're contributing.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
$6 a week.
And then have we, in the past, I think we've done kind of like tracking to figure out, does that actually, those travel guides result in people coming here?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, what that's look like. Right, no worries, but
Utah.com is also, it's owned by KSL, right? So it's,
Deseret, yeah, whatever.
yeah, so they're a pretty big media conglomerate.
So anyway, something else to think about. We could, again, do another co-op application with. And then the most obvious thing would say, okay, we've got this kind of strategy that we've done in the past. We're going to do it this year, most likely focusing on this kind of fly-in quality, high-spend visitor from these specific markets. Do we do something like that again as the kind of big project? And then is there anything that we're kind of missing that we could be considering kind of in this rush to get something in next Wednesday to the state?
Sounds worth it to me.
Is there, yeah, I think for me, like ideally, this would be baked within like a larger strategy. We have done all of the research all of the time and feel like, oh, we already know what we want. Clarified it with all of the stakeholders, we're good to go. But given that, I'm new to this, we got the timing late, we didn't have a media agency RFP, I think kind of going with what we have here for now moves us forward in a productive way. And then I'll speak about this in a second, but I think as we've been developing this economic development strategic plan, scope of work, the kind of tourism elements of it are large enough to constitute its own plan, I think. And so something I want to talk about, like a future agenda item, is thinking about putting together like a tourism strategic plan or allocating money for that, either through the next budget cycle or seeing if we can't try to get that money like this year and try to get those RFPs put out in parallel so that we have a 3-year plan for our tourism strategy and for our kind of general economic development and diversification strategy, all happening at the same time. And so that next year when this comes around, we'll have something in place that has taken into all the data into consideration, has some expert input, and allows us to try to have a venue to balance these kind of concerns that keep conflicting in our community. Because I think we're moving towards the direction of productive dialogue on this issue, and I think crystallizing that in a plan will allow us to move forward. We can talk about that now. We'll talk about that in a second.
Can I ask a question? So on this co-op grant thing, are you imagining the future flying campaign gets the like 210,000?
Somewhere in that, yeah,
So just the rest of it?
pretty much.
If we wanted, sorry, pardon my ignorance, but where does all the money for kind of like our local advertising, that kind of stuff, does
So,
that come from here or just a different?
It's a
pot?
great question. So if our advertising budget this year was 440 grand total. So of that, 150 grand is going towards the fly-in campaign that the UOT's matching. So that's a $300,000 total spend, of which 150 is coming out of our TRT marketing budget. And so the rest of that, 290,000 is split 200 for that Arches Times Entry Visitor campaign, and the other 90 in this year included like our local billboards, some print media. But in terms of like, I guess you're talking about the local education kind of components of that.
No, even just the local
Yeah.
billboards and.
So exactly. So that doesn't come out. This isn't like our entire marketing budget.
Right.
That's the question. So there's additional. There's additional monies. So this is like probably one of the more significant campaigns that we'll do next year, but it doesn't represent the entire marketing strategy.
Right. Would it make sense to add some of that into the co-op matching?
Yeah,
funds?
so there-
That
so
seems like
there-
a big increase for the fly-in.
Yeah, so there is a, and part of that was because I think we applied for the full amount and we got we ended up only getting 150,000 of that.
Oh,
basically.
So this kind of mirrors what has happened in the past.
I think that's what we're kind of proposing for this year's application, for the sake of like getting our ducks in a row on time and actually getting some free money to do this work with, rather than getting the perfect thing that might take too long and don't get it anymore. Daniel, you have your hand raised. He might have had a hand raised and then stepped out at the same time.
Or is he, or does he know he's not muted? Does he know he's muted?
I think he's incapable.
Yeah, you said if the screen was blank, you would not be there.
Yeah.
I think you have to unraise your hand on Zoom.
Yeah.
I think you raised it like 30 minutes ago.
Oh, you think so? Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Any other thoughts on kind of like co-op in general, like very specifically, and marketing strategy, etc.
Does this include the Sky West grant or that's?
So there's an
completely
additional
separate?
20 grand.
Okay.
But that could, for example, replace some of our matching funding.
Right.
If they put 20 grand into this project, that could be a part of our match, free up some of our money to do other projects.
Right.
I think also one big distinction that we've done historically that we didn't get set up to do this year by having a media agency contracted on a project by project basis was that, we didn't have a comprehensive marketing strategy for the whole year. We didn't have someone to direct when Salt Lake Magazine or the Denver Rockies or the Colorado Rockies reach out to have us advertise in their program or whatever. And part of the scope of work with the media agency is to take all of those and fit them into the strategy we want and get the best deals from them. We've been inundated with a million salespeople from different media vendors saying, hey, we've got a really good magazine. We have a wonderful sports program. And it takes up a lot of our time to just push them away or okay, maybe this works, maybe that works. And so part of that scope of work is managing vendor relationships and getting the best terms for whatever we're trying to get out there. Yeah. So I feel really good about that. Saving some time.
So is it okay to be kind of vague in this application, say future planning campaign is going to be developed?
It'll be developed like this week. So
Okay.
once that agency bid is awarded on Thursday morning, basically, although the contract won't be to the commission until next Tuesday to be fully signed, in order to get that application done by next Wednesday, I see us basically making that happen at the end of this week, putting that together, sending it all to you on Friday, basically by the whole day for reference. Actually doing the application beginning of next week. So by the context is taking all of this information in this conversation, bringing it into a conversation with that media agency that wins the bid, working with them to develop this, send that actually out to you in final form, hopefully something by the end of the week. And then everything gets legitimized in the county commission meeting on next Tuesday, and hopefully that there's enough time before that for commissioners to review and get input. Trying to make that happen as much as possible today. So the application that goes in next month, it will have more details than future flying question mark. I just don't have that agency to help me flesh that out right now. I was going to touch on the event grants really quickly, if that's okay, unless there's any specific questions. So we've allocated about 2/3 of the total, a little more than 2/3 of the total event advertising grant budget for this year, but there is 18 grand remaining for the 2022 year. So I wanted to think about that as it stands looking to next year. The current process, although we've changed the guidelines, the timeline for application, we're still slated to invite applications in August for events happening next year. And, I think we should have a conversation at some point, and maybe that should be now, about what do we want that to look like? Should it be focused? Some of the main changes is that we shifted away from some of those, specifically like November, December, January, February. We said it could be kind of any time of the year at travel council's discretion based off of what we're seeing. Drops in visitation. I think it's pretty clear that the hot summer months and the cold winter months are the times where we're not taking advantage of people coming here and trying to smooth that curve a little bit while trying to take into account the fact that people do want some off season, I think. And so, I see the event advertising grant program as a pretty fine scalpel tool to try to boost visitation on weekends when the community is already staffed up and wants to have people in town, but maybe we're seeing low visitation for whatever reason, and visitation that works really stoked to have in town. So in terms of timeline, one thing that is on here for future discussion is that typically travel council doesn't meet in July. It's hot and visitation drops. So, if we're going to do that, then we don't have any really meetings before that typical event grant application meeting happens in August to talk about what do we want to do with the rest of this money? Do we want to try to get people through a lot of doing events throughout the rest of the year in the fall? Do we want to roll over this remaining money into next year's budget? Because it'll go into reserves if we don't spend it this year. And then generally for the strategy of the program, we have, in addition to this 55 grand, 40 grand that's dedicated to not kind of tourism promotion, but general kind of recreation, event, film. That's an event grant that could be spent more on community events in the way that I'm seeing it. And so, I think that clearly, based on what we allocated here, the Folk Fest is very much this kind of traditional, it's a new event, we're coming to town. The free concert series is much more focused on something that's a community asset that's great, that is something that I think we should be supporting. So I think creating an intentional division of those two programs with different budgets, that here's one thing that's trying to support events that are bringing people to town, and here's this thing that's more for community-oriented events and locals fest, whatever that means. You know what I mean? So doing stuff like that out of a different budget, but within this event grant program, it's where I'm thinking about it in abstract, but I haven't sat down and wrote like a program proposal. Any thoughts on that?
I think we denied that. It's two people that were asked about Star Hall.
We did.
So we did deny them, so I think that should be kind of part of the conversation that we denied.
Were they the only ones that applied last year that didn't get the grant?
I think so. The other thing that we're talking about was the stage, which that's all taken.
That's separate.
Yeah. That was it.
So,
Yeah, I think you're right.
so if we're thinking, I mean, for the remaining money, I've been in contact with them since, and they've been doing a ton of stuff. So they're doing the Moab Backyard Bash, where they're having bands at the Backyard Theater once a month throughout the rest of the year. And they're really trying quite hard to bootstrap a kind of event management company. So we could, for example, invite them back with some coaching beforehand to say, what could you spend this money for the rest of the year, for example, on some of the events that you're already putting out. Could you advertise them and try to get ticket sales up and all that. So that's, I think, a really smart way to start for the rest of for the money for the rest of the year. But I think they seemed a little green, which I think they are. But they're super stoked on bringing live music that we don't have in town otherwise.
I think we might have to open up to everyone.
Right. So, but if we do that, are we going to take them all at the same time? Or are we going to try to do something sooner than that?
So this is semi a discussion of what we're gonna do, but also whether or not we have to have a July meeting in order to go through
Right.
these.
Right, and to be fair, like we could not have a regular July meeting, but schedule, I think what I was thinking for August was having a separate like event interview meeting and like general travel council meeting, because I think in the past that becomes the whole August meeting basically. And so having a time period where we're taking all the applicants separate from the normal business of the travel council in August is what I was thinking. But yeah, I mean, we can also talk about this over email. There could be a check-in or a subcommittee that could work on this.
Was there a max of what we would give for each one? Was it?
I don't think there is a max per.
I'm just thinking if we open it up, like they're gonna come back, ask for more money. Who else is gonna ask? I don't know. Like, is it making it more? You have to deal with 20 people. Like that deal. But, yeah.
Does the money have to be spent for an event in 2022?
I think typically the way that the county's trying to counting is that as much as possible, if the activity took place in the budget year, that's when we're trying to argue for it. So I think the intention would be that 18,000 either is rolled over to next year's program, and we can increase that budget amount accordingly, basically, or try to spend that on events that are already happening this year, and try to increase.
I mean, do some in August. We don't meet till August. It gives them September, October, November, December, 4 months to pull an event off that maybe they have.
I would
plans
imagine
for.
this is probably an event that's already happening. that could use a boost.
Yeah.
Is how I would see that for the rest of this year. Because for in their case, they have a bunch of dates. I connected them with Chanel. They were looking for a lodging sponsor, for example.
I think it'd be great to be transparent and say we have remaining money to be spent this year and open it back up and spread the word
I
instead of rolling it over. And so just say we're gonna spend it this year. That's just my feeling.
And then if we don't get quality applications or enough, then we roll it over.
So maybe an action item here is for our department to try to look at last year's visitation curve or something like that and try to identify, key weekends or key times of the year, or more like block out ones that we don't need, like we're not needing additional event support basically. And make a specific time limit people can apply for. Have a specific event application grant day in the fall or in August, and take applications for the rest of this year and for next year. And we open it up for community-based events and for kind of visitation oriented events. Because we do have that 40 grand in the budget for 2022 that we could and just see what comes up. I mean, could see there's 40 grand for local events that are supposed to be supporting the all that stuff.
Okay.
The school play, sure. Why not? Anybody can apply. How does that feel? It's like we can plan on that. I'll be working with Jenny. Is there anybody that might be useful to have like maybe one other person who wants to be thinking about events and how we're going to do this subcommittee type format rather than having a July meeting, unless we really want to meet in July.
I mean, I'll just say, it sounds like opening it up again, sounds like a lot of work for y'all to like field all the applicants and do the whole thing again.
But we are going to have to open it up for next year anyway. And I think wanting to be transparent about what that looks like and hopefully, I mean, we could also change the time. We don't have to. It's been you apply in August for the following year. We changed the rules itself are more flexible, so we could make it a rolling deadline. We don't have to make it this like it happens once, and then we plan it all out. I think that's useful because then we know the budget that we've allocated towards it. If we already know these programs, that's what we're going to put as our budget request. With the county, which isn't how we did it this year because we didn't have a full thing, and I really knew what I was doing. I got the budget, so I just threw numbers out.
I mean, I think it'd be great to just do this in July. That's for the meeting. I mean, this is the main thing coming up in July and August.
It sounds like a meeting.
Subcommittee.
Okay, so maybe
Okay.
maybe we have an event grant, like an event focused subcommittee meeting in July to kind of start planning this out. I'm gonna ask for one volunteer that's not Jenny.
Do we need a certain amount of people on the subcommittee? I'm sure Lacey would love to do it. We could- Who wants to volunteer? Lacey? Anyone?
I'll volunteer, Lucy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I'll
think
tell
it
you some
depends.
more.
I don't
Yeah.
know what my like hotel stuff is gonna be like right
Yeah.
there, so
Yeah.
that's the only thing.
Well,
like,
how about
time frame
we
is
find a
little bit
date
right now.
and we'll invite everybody and whoever can come,
See,
come.
it's like-
If we don't have a quorum, I have to think through if it has to be a full meeting or not. It could just be like, just be in our office and chat it out, and try to figure out what's next steps, which is what I would like to do.
Yeah, that sounds like,
Yeah, we're not gonna make any binding decisions, but just do a planning meeting sometime in July.
So we'll have a meeting about having a meeting.
Yeah, we'll do
Okay.
that. And we'll
Great.
send out an email about setting up a meeting time.
Okay.
We'll set up a meeting time and then we'll have some people meet formally. Oh. I love it. Okay, do you want to talk, what else setting this on future items?
We talked about the events. We're all set for the 2023. We're gonna update the website, right?
Update
new
the
date.
website. Oh,
The new
yeah,
date.
because the current event grant
It
page
is
is out of date.
2021.
Yeah, she
Yes.
needs some TLC on
Okay.
that.
Go to,
See that grab page.
I think that's good. to kind of leave
Keeps me up
it
at
at
night.
that, and then
Thinking about it.
we'll
I
finish
was
the
thinking
meeting.
about it last night.
The whole county
Didn't
website keeps
but
me
I
up at night,
was.
I gotta say.
It's painful.
Yeah, so it's at, you know, it says it's 2021. Yeah, we'll be able to change this.
I'm just gonna change that to 22. No, I'm kidding. I'll do more.
And then next, just so no July meeting. Everyone's okay with that?
Sounds like there'll be a
Oh,
soft July.
bummer. What a pity. We're missing.
Right. We're gonna miss one.
Then we talked about the chamber chat at noon.
Yeah, and then the last thing that's on here for future agenda items is that as the budget review process for 2023 starts in September, that we'll have a special meeting that's specifically focused on coming up with that prioritized list of expenditures for TRT and TRCCA sometime August, early September. So I think when this chamber chat or county commission / chamber chat about TRT and TRCCA is happening, I think looking at what the past has been spent on for educating and getting ourselves in the right place to think about what we're recommending to the commission when it comes to TRT and TRCCA expenditures for this upcoming budget cycle. And one of the changes this year is that the commission has to hold an actual public meeting where they review that particular list, whereas in the past, it's been a requirement. It's just been a part of the budget process. So there's going to be like an actual meeting during the budget process where the county commission meets and they review the list of expenditures that we've come up with and it gets talked out.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a change to TRT law that happened this past session, which I think is great. And then lastly, I think thinking about maybe talking about like this tourism strategic plan is at the very least, I want to put it in next year's budget and or perhaps even seeing if I can try to squeeze it in this year somehow and move money around. But I'm just curious thoughts from the board on that when it comes to putting together some kind of tourism strategic plan. If it happened next year, it'd like start right in January.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, sooner the better.
Especially where there's so much money, like that you have to spend TRT that's not like specifically tourism related.
Right.
So I do think it needs to be covered.
Totally. Yeah, I think that could be really, I mean, it's, again, this is totally a Chris Bear conversation, but we could talk about like if our budget's maxed out this year, taking something out of the reserves to pay for a plan this year, if that's going to allow us to plan more effectively into the future. And
Well, I think it goes hand in hand with your economic diversity.
Yeah.
Sector of everything, to kind of map out the tourism spot, like portion of it.
and making it all happen at the same time.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, like, we're not just 100% tourism, we're trying to like diversify also.
Yeah. Exactly. Or the other way around.
Right, exactly.
And I think that when I was originally thinking that would be in the scope for the strategic plan, but the kind of person who's going to respond to that RFP, who's doing like commercial land use analysis and thinking through industry clusters and all that kind of stuff, is not the same person that's going to think about like a sustainable tourism strategy that's going to satisfy everybody else. Different person. So I think that's probably the way to go. So I'm going to take a look at. But yeah, okay. Any other questions? I think we're at the end of the agenda.
No questions.
Do you want more guidance on that flying campaign, or I know you said you needed to. make
Yeah,
some
I think the goal is that we're gonna try to, based on this conversation, I'm gonna try to put together my best guess of everybody, what we've been talking about, and then review that proposal basically at the end of the week. But I think there will be another opportunity to review this today. It might mean that the agenda materials change before the commission Tuesday, but I think Mallory's okay with it sometimes. I think wanting as much input as possible and keeping as transparent as a process between the county commission and the traffic council on this going forward is the goal. Cool.
All right. Really? Pick it up. Right. Like to adjourn the.
Oh, there's one other thing right here. So the consideration of travel council public communique regarding marketing strategy and goals. So I think as we've been talking about this, just more public communication about what's happening within the county. I think once we have like a larger strategy for either next year or this year, or kind of a snapshot of what's going on, I think especially if there is going to be like a public meeting in July, having some kind of a letter to the editor or something that's like, under Jenny's name representing the travel council board that's saying, here's where we stand on doing these things, and we've been doing this stuff in coordination with the county commission, we're listening to this data, here's the programs we're doing to kind of get out there and ahead of all the river mill that happens all over the place. And here, this is what we're doing. This is the things we're caring about, things we're thinking about. Yeah, I think that's something I'd like to do, and that probably be out ratified, drafted type thing. Any thoughts on that in general?
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just love what
Great.
we're asking.
Yeah. So I think trying to get that out, maybe we'll try to think about making that, facilitate that so that there's something written like. It comes
I
out
think
that
it
we
just
get
builds
that
more
meeting.
transparency.
Yeah.
It's great.
And I was thinking this would be great because, spoiler, this week, Evan Clapper's got something in the Times Independent talking about this, and I just thought that it would be great for folks to
Did you
hear
get it in
from.
this week or will it next week?
I don't know when he got it in. It was planned for this week.
Yeah, but I think we were still doing a lot of
Yeah, okay.
back and forth.
Then
But it'd
maybe
be
next
nice
week.
if it got in this week, but it might be next week.
Well, you
But,
said they were waiting for it.
yeah.
They were waiting for it. They were holding the space for it.
So what is the,
But anyways,
It's a really
this was
good
just in
letter.
response to questions about visitation and economic trends. And I just figure since we talk about this so much and we're trying to make this data more transparent, I figure it's great for folks to hear from the commission. I also think in the future it'd be great to hear from this body because we are all non-commission members, who have a certain authority as well. And so I was just thinking that that's a great way to continue building transparency and show that a mix of people are involved in these decisions. So that was just kind of my idea behind, us having our own kind of helping drive that narrative. So,
Cool. Yeah, so we'll work on that. So that the email, I think. Okay.
All right,
Did you adjourn
early,
it?
9 minutes. No objections, like to close the June 14th meeting?
Thank you.
thank you.
We're done.
Thank you.
Are we having a meeting?